Before we get started, I just wanted to share a quick disclaimer. This podcast is based on my personal experiences and what I've lived through. Some episodes include difficult topics like trauma and abuse that may be triggering for some listeners. If you need support, I've included resources in the episode description. All stories are shared from my perspective, and names, identities, and specific details have been changed or removed to protect the privacy of those involved. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. My goal is to help others feel seen, raise awareness, and remind anyone listening that they are not alone. Before we begin, I just want to share a quick additional disclaimer. This episode contains sensitive topics, including graphic details of trauma and abuse. Please take care while listening and know that it's okay to pause or skip this episode if you need to. Support resources are also included in the episode description. Hey, no masks, no bullshit, just truth. If you're here, that means something in you is searching for truth, for healing, for a voice that sounds a little like yours. And I want you to know you're not alone anymore. This podcast, this space, it's not about fixing you. It's about finally telling the truth about what broke you and about what you had to survive just to still be standing. I didn't start this to be some expert or influencer or whatever the hell people think they're supposed to be these days. I started this because I was tired of whispering, tired of feeling like my story was too much, too messy, too emotional, and too heavy. Tired of living through the kind of pain that no one talks about and carrying it like it was my fault. I've lived through physical abuse, narcissistic abuse, manipulation, gaslighting, violence that wasn't always physical but cut just as deep. I've loved people who broke me and called it love, and I've begged for breadcrumbs and settled for chaos. Somewhere along the way, I forgot who the hell I was. I spent years rebuilding. Some days I felt strong, and other days I barely held it together. And there were nights I didn't even think I would make it. But I did, and you will too. This podcast is my way of cracking open the silence. Because healing from abuse, real healing, it's messy as hell. It's not always inspirational. It's not always pretty. It's crying over a song that you used to love, or being triggered by a fucking tone of a voice. It's finally realizing that you weren't crazy. You were conditioned. It's mourning the version of you that stayed because you didn't know how to leave. This space is for the ones who were made to feel like they were the problem, the ones that were told that they were too sensitive or too emotional, too angry, too much, the ones who carry silent grief or invisible trauma, and a body that still flinches at kindness. You're not dramatic. You're not weak. You're not broken. You were hurt. You were neglected. You were emotionally, mentally, maybe even physically abandoned by the very people who should have protected you. And you're still here. So this podcast, this is for the women and men who are trying to love themselves again after years of being torn apart. For the moms and dads holding it together for their kids while their hearts are shattered. For the ones who look strong on the outside, but they feel like they're drowning on the inside. for the survivors, the truth tellers, for the ones who stayed quiet for too long. And I don't care if you're in the middle of the wreckage or already crawling out. There's room for you here too. There's no shame in still hurting. There's no shame in starting over again. There's no timeline for healing, because healing isn't linear. Every week, I'm going to bring to you truth, unfiltered, raw, sometimes heavy, sometimes hopeful, but always real. Because you've been through enough bullshit. You don't need another fake healing space that skips over the messy parts. You need someone who gets it. I'm not here to save you, because you don't need saving. You need to be seen, heard, and most importantly, believed. So, if you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. You're not too far gone. You're not behind. And this time, you don't have to heal alone. I remember the first time I gaslighted myself to protect him. We had just gotten back from a wedding, and everything seemed fine, so I thought, until it wasn't. We were in the parking lot of a hotel, and suddenly, something in his energy just shifted. It was like a light switch flipped. Out of nowhere, he started saying the cruelest things, words that cut straight through me. I tried to stay calm. I tried to de-escalate it. I tried to go inside and just go to bed. But the calmer I stayed, the more cruel and angry he became. It was like he was feeding off of my softness. Like my tears gave him more power. I was crying and I was visibly hurting. And I begged him to stop. And it didn't matter. Nothing I did or said was going to make him stop. So I made a decision. I would just walk away, give him space, and let him calm down. I wasn't trying to fight. I wasn't trying to escalate. I just wanted peace. I just wanted for us to go to bed. And that's when it happened. In a split second, I was being strangled up against his vehicle. No warning, no build-up, just his hands around my throat. And in that moment, I didn't know if I was going to pass out. I didn't know if I was going to die. All I felt was fear. Full body, soul deep, paralyzing fear. My heart was pounding, my body frozen, and my mind scrambling to survive. And when he finally let go, I instinctively just ran inside and I collapsed on the hotel floor, shaking, crying, in shock. I was flooded with so many different emotions, and then I started to justify it. He was too tired, or it must have been the heat from the day. He drank too much, or maybe he was just too stressed. I started protecting him and blaming everything but him, making excuses for what he just did to me. Because that's what abuse does. It warps your sense of reality. It rewires your brain to protect the person who literally just made you fear for your fucking life. It makes you question what you felt, even when your body is still trembling from the trauma. And here's what I didn't know back then, or maybe I didn't want to know, but strangulation is one of the most lethal forms of domestic violence. Unconsciousness can happen within seconds, and death in minutes. If your partner has ever strangled you, your risk of being killed by them is tenfold. And that wasn't a drunken mistake. It wasn't the heat, and it wasn't stress. It wasn't the long day. It was a fucking choice. And I survived it. But surviving doesn't mean you don't carry it. And it took me a long time to admit the truth of what that night really was. And here's the part that most people will never understand. That night didn't make me leave. You'd think it would have. You'd think being strangled would be the final straw. You'd think something that violent and that traumatic would have been enough. But it wasn't. I stayed for 2 more years. Even though I knew how bad that night was, even though it haunted me, even though I thought about it constantly, and I couldn't even talk about it out loud, I stayed. Because what I didn't know back then was that I was trauma bonded to somebody who had completely unraveled who I was. Someone who used emotional manipulation, guilt, silence, charm, blame, love, fear, all of it, to keep me stuck, to keep me questioning myself, to keep me needing him, and to keep me thinking that he actually loved me. That's what narcissistic and emotional abuse does. It's not just one violent moment. It's the thousands of little ones that come before it. The ones that tear down your self-trust piece by piece until the big moment hits and you freeze. You minimize it, you blame yourself, and you stay. Because by that point, you don't even recognize who you are anymore. That night didn't wake me up, but I look back now and I see it for what it was. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I was being fucking abused. It wasn't that my brain wasn't ready to admit it. It's that I hadn't realized how I ended up there. I didn't understand how far I'd been pulled under, how slowly I'd been broken down, or how deeply I'd been conditioned to believe it wasn't that bad. I didn't recognize it as abuse because when you're in it, survival feels normal. And that's the part people don't get. It's not always denial. Sometimes you truly don't see how fucked up it is until much later. But now, I see it clearly. That night wasn't a one-off. It was accumulation of everything that came before it. Every silent punishment, every guilt trip, every twisted version of the truth. But most importantly, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't dramatic. I was being emotionally destroyed by somebody that I loved. My body knew it even before I did. One of the biggest reasons that I'm doing this podcast, besides making sure that no one ever feels alone, is because people just still don't understand what abuse actually looks like. They think it's just bruises or screaming or black eyes. But most of the time, more often than not, it's so much quieter than that. It's the way somebody makes you doubt your own reality. The way they break you down with silence, guilt, manipulation, charm. The way they twist your words, your memories, your mind, until you're not even sure what's true anymore. It's how you stop trusting your own gut and how you start apologizing for things that weren't even your fault. How you start hiding what's really happening, not because you want to lie, but because you're so exhausted from trying to explain something nobody believes anyway. And the truth is, a lot of people just don't want to see it. They either turn the other cheek or they say it's not my business. They believe the version that they're shown, the charming, funny, well-liked version, and assuming that you must be overreacting. So many victims just don't just survive the abuse. They survive the silence of the people around them, the people who didn't ask, didn't notice, didn't care, or even worse, the ones who did see it and still did nothing. You slowly lose everyone. Your friends, your family, the people who thought would never leave. And by the time you finally realize what you're living through, you look around and there's no one left. You're alone, and worse, you're a stranger to yourself. that's what people don't get. Abuse doesn't just take your safety, it takes your identity. You forget who you are. You forget what you love, what you want, what you sound like, what makes you you. You become so used to walking on eggshells that even when you finally leave, you don't even know how to stand anymore. And when you try to talk about it, it's like you can't find the words. Not because it wasn't that bad, but because it was so bad, it just doesn't translate. You try to explain it, and then it comes out wrong or confused, fragmented. Or you say you're fine because you don't know how to say what's actually true. Because what is true, it's too big to fit into words. So when people look at you like you're being dramatic, or they say it couldn't have been that bad, or they compare it to something that just doesn't even come close, you shut down and you crawl back into yourself, and suddenly you're questioning everything all over again. And that's the damage people don't see. That's why survivors go quiet, because the abuse was one thing, but the invalidation afterwards, it makes us feel like we're insane all over again. I remember sitting in my car after one of the fights, scrolling through my texts and trying to find anything that I could have said that set him off. I couldn't understand it. And I was hyper, focused on figuring out what I could have done differently if it was my fault. And driving myself even more insane than I felt. And then there was other nights that I would lie awake wondering how the hell I got here. Wondering if anybody would even believe me if I said it out loud. So eventually I stopped answering texts, and eventually people stopped texting. I pulled away, and people don't chase you. And one day you realize the silence isn't just in your relationship, it's everywhere. You could post a photo and nobody cares anymore. They just see a fake smile, but nobody asks what's going on behind it. And when you finally try to open up, you realize something else. Survivors don't just have to explain the abuse. They have to convince people it counts as abuse. Do you know what it's like to have to convince people of your pain? To rehearse what you're going to say so it sounds believable. So you don't come off too emotional, too dramatic, or too damaged. That's what survivors learn to do. Not just to survive the abuse, but to learn how to present our pain in a way that the world will accept. Because if you mess up the delivery, if you cry too hard, or you get too angry, if you say it loud, or say it out of order, people stop listening. And that right there, that's the second kind of trauma survivors go through. The one where you're re-traumatized for not telling your story the right way. Abuse doesn't just destroy our mind, it lives in our body. It's in our heart rate changes. We stop sleeping. Our immune system crashes. We get sick all the time. We can't eat, or we eat too much. Our body's screaming, even when our voice isn't. Nobody talks about this. We don't talk about it in schools, not in families, not even most therapy offices, until we bring it up first. We teach young girls how to be polite, but not how to listen to their intuition. We teach boys not to cry, and then we wonder when they grow up unable to process emotions without using control or power. We silence victims and glorify survival, but we never actually talk about what it takes to survive this. And maybe you're listening right now thinking, that's me. Or maybe you're someone who's watching someone you love fall into it and you don't know how to help. This is for the both of you. That's what this podcast is about. Not just sharing what I've lived through, but I'm trying to help people understand what this actually looks like, how it happens, what to watch for, what survivors go through, not just during the relationship, but after, how it affects our nervous system, our sense of safety, our ability to connect with people, our capacity to trust, even exist without flinching. Because it's not enough to just say leave. And it's not enough to tell somebody to just move on. We need to be having real conversations about what abuse does to someone and how easy it is for the world to overlook these signs. This podcast is for survivors, yes, but it's also for the ones who don't know what they're looking at. The parents, the friends, the coworkers, the strangers, the people who might have noticed something but didn't know what to say. The ones who never lived through it themselves but want a better understanding so that they could help somebody that they love or avoid becoming a victim themselves. Because I wish I had somebody explain it to me like this. I wish somebody pulled me aside and said, this is what emotional abuse looks like. This is how trauma bonding works. This is how they're going to make you feel crazy. And this is how, and this is why, this is not your fault. Even if one person hears this and starts paying closer attention, or even if one man or woman sees themselves in these stories and finally realizes, oh my God, this isn't love, and leaves, or even if one parent starts recognizing the signs in their son or their daughter's relationship before it's too late, then it's worth every hard thing that I have ever lived through to be able to speak this now. People love survival stories. They love a comeback. They want to believe that once we leave, we're safe, that it's over, that the healing is a straight shot upward. But they don't know what actually happens after we leave. They don't see the grief that hits us like a freight train. They don't see the mornings we wake up and feel empty instead of free. They don't see the way silence swallows us whole once the chaos ends. Because when you finally get out, you're not celebrating, you're unraveling. You're standing in the wreckage of your own life trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Your brain is fried, your body's wrecked, your sense of self is gone, and worst of all, nobody checks in. The people who said, let me know if you need anything, they disappear. The ones who had a feeling something was wrong, they go quiet. The people who called you strong, they just assume that you're fine. But we're not fine. We're numb, we're shattered, we're flooded with flashbacks and second guessing and shame, and we're alone. And on top of all of that, we're expected to perform healing, smile more, post more positive things because sharing the truth is too negative, make it look like we're moving on, because if we don't, people get uncomfortable. They tune out. They call us bitter. They say we're stuck in the past, and sometimes we're made out to be the toxic one. So we start pretending. We fake being okay. We act like we're over it because no one knows what to do with our pain if it doesn't come with a redemption bow on the top. And here's the kicker. Even when we leave, our bodies don't know we're safe. Our nervous system doesn't magically reset. We're still flinching at sounds. We still freeze when someone raises their voice. We still jump at tones, looks, changes in moods. Still reacting to the possibility of danger because our bodies were trained to survive, not rest. We know we're out, but our bodies still act like we're in it because abuse doesn't just destroy our sense of safety. It steals our ability to feel safe even when we are. And we live in a world that thinks leaving is the hard part. They think survival is the climax of the story, the part where the credits roll and everybody claps. But really, survival is just the start of what comes next. Because now, we're fucking left with a trauma-wired brain that can't tell the difference between real danger and a raised eyebrow. We're left second-guessing every interaction, even when no one's yelling. We're left analyzing text messages, reading into silences, bracing for the next explosion, even when nothing's wrong. This isn't being paranoid. This is trauma. This is what most people just don't understand unless they lived it. And even some of us don't even realize what's happening in our own bodies. We just think we're broken. Because I know I thought I was broken for the longest time. But like I said, this is what abuse does. It rewires us. It trains our nervous system to respond to threat even in peace. It convinces us that calm is suspicious. It makes safety feel dangerous and silence feel like abandonment. And the worst of all, we're still expected to be believable. Not just real, believable. We don't just survive it, we have to prove it to strangers, to friends, sometimes even to therapists. We have to package the pain in a way people will understand it. Not too emotional, not too angry, not too messy. God forbid we're too fucking much. We have to look like victims, but not so much that people get uncomfortable. We have to be broken but functional, hurt but hopeful, honest but careful. So we rehearse, we water it down, we strip out the rage, the guilt, the confusion, the shame, all so we don't get dismissed as unstable. And when we don't tell the story right, they stop listening. They say we're exaggerating. They say it couldn't have been that bad. What most people don't realize is what they are asking us. They're expecting what they're expecting from someone who barely made it out alive. That's what people just don't get. Leaving doesn't end the abuse. It basically just changes form at this point. The isolation, the invalidation, and the being traumatized. It all keeps going, but now it's just dressed up as healing, as expectation, as silence. Nobody talks about the way healing can feel like another trauma. Nobody tells you how lonely it is after the storm. Nobody tells you that sometimes the quiet is worse than the chaos. Nobody tells you that you'll miss the person who broke you and hate yourself for it. Nobody tells you healing will feel like mourning someone who is still alive while mourning the version of yourself who stayed. But that's just the truth, and that's why this story matters. Because if you never lived this, you won't see any of it. You'll think we're okay because we left. You'll assume the hard part is over. You'll wonder why we're not smiling more, why we still seem anxious, why we haven't moved on. You might even say something like, at least you're not in it anymore. But that's not how trauma works. That's not how nervous systems heal. That's not how any of this goes. Someone is listening to this right now who did leave, and they don't feel free. They don't feel whole. They feel broken, but in a new way, because no one warned them how hard this part will be. This part is for them, so that they know that they're not crazy. They're not failing. They're just feeling what no one ever talks about. They survived. But survival it isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of learning how to live again without the mask, without the performance, and without the shame. And if you've never lived this, let this be the moment that you finally see it. This isn't a healing speech. It's not a plea for sympathy. It's the part that most people just never consider. The reality is that we live with, like after the storm. The part they never ask about because they just think it's over. They think that we're bitter because we post again or smile again, function again, because they say, I'm okay, or we make it look believable because we're back at work, or we're raising kids, or we're in school, we're surviving, and somehow that's enough proof that we've moved on. But we haven't moved on. We've moved through hell, and we're still carrying the weight of it every day. It's what nobody sees is how deep this rewiring goes. We're not just healing from some memories. We're healing from an entire identity that was shaped around survival, from a body that only knows how to exist in fight or flight, from a nervous system that learned to monitor tone, body language, silence, mood shifts, all before we opened our eyes in the morning. We're not just healing from what happened, we're healing of who we had to become in order to survive it. And that's not something that just gets undone with time. So when people say, you're not in it anymore, but what they don't get is we still are. Maybe not physically or psychologically, but we're still inside the cage even after the door was opened. Because safety doesn't feel safe. Because silence feels threatening. And because we can't relax without guilt. And because we learned that trust is a setup. Everybody wants to believe that the hard part was leaving and it ended when we walked away, but we're still paying for what they did to us every fucking day. And while everybody assumes that we're better now, we're waking up every morning in a body that flinches at kindness, it tightens at peace, and it expects abandonment in love. We're not waiting for the happy ending. We're bracing for the next impact because we know how fast it could all flip, how easily somebody can become unsafe, and how comfort has become a weapon. We don't relax because we can't, not without years of work to undo what has been done. But nobody sees that. They just see us talking again and working and laughing, and everybody thinks we're healed. They don't see the panic attacks, the disassociation, the sleepless nights, the constant emotional flashbacks, the chronic pain that the doctors can't explain, the way our whole body shuts down after a normal day just from masking trauma for 10 straight hours. They think we're being dramatic or too sensitive, too guarded, too negative, but we're not negative. We're just real. We don't have the luxury of forgetting what we've lived through, and we carry it in our bones. It's in our cells, in the spaces nobody can see. And yet, we're still showing up. We're still trying. We're still unlearning, rebuilding, relearning how to exist in a world that doesn't make space for this kind of pain. So if you never lived it, please stop asking why we're not over it yet. Stop assuming that absence of bruises means we're fine. Stop calling it baggage because it makes you uncomfortable. Because we carry is not weakness, it's evidence. It's evidence of everything we survived. everything we had to endure alone, everything we still are healing from, without the understanding, support, or awareness we deserve. We don't need to be saved. We don't need to be fixed. We just need to be seen. Take what you need and leave what you don't. But please, learn to love yourself again. Peace by fucking peace. If you're still here after everything I shared, then you already know that this podcast isn't going to be easy listening. It's for the ones who lived through hell and are still trying to make sense of it. This isn't surface level healing talk. This is for the people that are carrying invisible wounds, the ones triggered by tone, by silence, by memories that nobody else understands. I'm going to talk about what trauma really does to your body, the kind of abuse that doesn't leave bruises, parenting while healing, PTSD that shows up out of fucking nowhere, the rage, grief, shame, survival, all of it, and what it actually looks like to have to rebuild yourself from nothing. Some weeks I'll share parts of my story. Some weeks I'll speak straight to the version of you that's still stuck in survival mode. And some weeks I might be in the thick of it too. But I won't be fake. I'm not going to fake being okay to make anyone else comfortable. I'm not here to perform. I'm not here to offer some perfect step-by-step guide. I'm here because I lived it, and I'm still in it. I'm still figuring out how to heal fully. Even though I know I'll never fully be healed, but I'm still trying to learn to heal the parts of me that I can. I'm learning how to live after everything that has happened to me. And I know what it's like to beg for clarity, to crave peace, and to feel like you've completely lost yourself. This podcast is where I'm going to tell the truth. It's where the silence ends, and where the healing gets to be real, even when it's fucking messy. Let it be fucking messy. And if you're still listening, I want you to know something that took me way too long to believe. You're not weak. You're not overreacting. You're not broken. What you went through, or what you're still going through, it's real. And you didn't deserve any of it. Maybe you're still in it, still trying to make sense of what happened, still calling it love because the truth hurts too much, still trying to be okay when you're anything else but okay. I know that version of you. I've been there. And if that's where you are right now, I want you to know. You don't have to do this alone. You're allowed to feel lost. You're allowed to still be on learning. You're allowed to take your time. This podcast is for you, for your voice and for your story, for your truth you weren't allowed to say out loud until now.